All right, we are here to paint the city scene in San Francisco, California, off of Alamo Square. And we have a pretty complicated scene in front of us, a lot of hills with tall buildings on them. So we have a really small canvas to work with that. So what we really gonna have to do is just really break things down to their basic shapes. And the one nice thing about buildings like this is that they are, in essence, if you strip away all the detail, they are just big, cubes and rectangles and such, and little trees here and there. So I'll be able to organize this into a small or a simple scene easier than you might believe. So let's start with brush to draw this stuff in. So drawing stage might take a little more time than I have before, other than maybe the rural scene. So let's decide where the top and bottom of our main scene will be. So let's say that's that tall building. Squint and see what other dark shapes we can build from. So squinting and kind of just recording the large shapes, or not even large shapes, the dark shapes right now. See if you can connect all the dark shapes together as well. So at this stage, I'm just trying to make a drawing that kind of looks like it's a black and white picture, but with the contrast turned all the way up. You don't have to get too fussy with the details as you move away from your focal point, because they won't. You don't want them to distract too much. So I don't see a lot of darks out here. Just want to give a little bit of an indication so that I know where to stop my shapes when I block in. So this is supposed to represent simple versions of all the dark shapes I'm seeing. Working with a small canvas will help with that too, because you'll be able to simplify everything a lot more readily, not having such a big canvas to work on. Okay. Actually, it's a little bit off. Oops. Okay, let's put in a color for our sky, because what will happen is I'll be able to silhouette those big buildings just by putting in the sky where I want it to be. So just mixing ultramarine and white for now. Keep it pretty basic. So just putting in the sky in like that, I have an idea of the skyline. Okay, next. Maybe I'll work light to dark for our block in here. Actually, this is going to end up being dark to light. Kind of. This is the next darkest, biggest shape. Really helpful to have some flat brushes in your arsenal as far as painting city scenes go, because the man-made shapes lend themselves to being chiseled out like that. Putting in these little yellow accents where I see them, but depending on how the painting goes, I might change the color or get rid of them. Lock in the color back here. It's a little bluer. Okay. So, paint in the light shapes. Putting some color into these buildings, even though they look pretty white. I just want some room to go lighter when I add more detail. later on. So paint these kind of an off-white, just a slightly warm white, as I mixed in some orange. Actually, let me block in the shadows on the buildings. It's kind of a light gray out of my blue and brown. Using the shape of the brush as much as I can to indicate the shape of what I'm painting here. And that's there. It's a complicated scene that you can easily get lost in, so you really got to make sure to squint and simplify and slow down if you need to. There's a lot of browns in these buildings. Putting that in. So just making approximate decisions for the block-ins here. Block in the rest of these light shapes that's left. Oops. It's a lot more secure. What's left? All right. bit off there in my drawing, so go back in and redo that part. Okay, so I got it blocked in pretty much, so let's go in and just put in some of the shadow shapes, really refine them a bit more, or define them, not refine. Just going in and drawing the shadow shapes out from the what I believe will be my focal point. Just taking a dark blue mixture, blue, burnt sienna, and a little bit of white. Cheating a little bit and working on the lights first too. I feel like I need to do that. Just trying to define this shadow side a bit more. Just going with basic principles of painting. How you would paint a block if it was a still life. It's kind of how I'm treating these. They're just big blocks. Using most of the same shadow color to represent my shadows right now. It's far enough in the distance that the shadows kind of are in the same color family. Don't be afraid to go right over anything that you thought you got right the first time, because you probably didn't. That's kind of what I'm doing right now. Still just methodically putting in all the shadow shapes I see, and because it's such a small canvas, I could do a pretty good job of just consolidating it and it not looking weird. Whereas maybe with a bigger canvas it might, but Just going back in any of the light planes that I may have not gotten yet. That seems about right. Yeah. So I think that will conclude our block in. It still looks a little abstract in areas, but at least I can make sense of everything that I'm looking at on my painting. So it'll be a lot easier now to do a comparison stage at this point. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. Now in the comparison stage, and first thing I'll compare is the first thing I put down in the first part, and that's the sky. And so in order for these to read more as highlights, I need to darken the sky. So that's what I'll do. I'll mix a mixture of ultramarine and white again, but more ultramarine in it this time. And I'll just mix it right into what I got, and that should get me to a middle ground that is closer to what I want. Our sky might be a little too dark in some spots, but I think we could continue to refine that. Okay, so yeah, They're definitely looking more like highlights. There's more contrast. And let's see, try and get a little bit of the color more accurate. Worry too much about the color hue. Shape and value of this building is more important. Get right. I do want the light or the dark side, these planes to read darker than the sky, so I come in and make them a little darker. Okay, so let's just keep darkening the shadows of the buildings relative to the sky, and just be a little more careful in our shapes. Mostly painting with horizontal strokes. I feel like it gives me more of a control of where I can begin and end my shapes. A little bit sharper that way for the most part. It's over here, forgot. Okay, I think I did pretty well with the blocking of the darks. I don't see like I need to compare a lot. Actually, there are a couple little parts here that could go darker. Too dark, too blue. Okay. Getting ready to start comparing the light side now. Get some white going, a bit of color in there, some yellow ochre. Yellow ochre and white is a good default light color for things that the sun is hitting. Don't go pure white in your highlights here. There'll be nowhere else to go except darker if you do that. Like the value, just adjusting the hue a bit. As best I can. This building is a little cooler, even though it's right in the sun, so it must be slightly cool gray. Kind of the same thing happening over here. What else is adjusting down here? Just going through and slightly fine-tuning all the colors and of those light blocks that I painted. They're close because the value is pretty close when I blocked it in, but just changing the hue a bit here and there. Buildings look a little cooler, which means a little more blue. I'll mix a little bit more blue into my mixture and paint it in that way. Light shape creeping up that building. Same down here. Going through and spotting some smaller light shapes. Just go in and hunt for these little blocks of color. It's kind of fun. Use other shapes to determine the shape you're enveloping. So I'm using this yellowy orange to better define the shape in front of it. Wish I hadn't painted, so I'll put that in there. Which I kind of had, but slightly off. Why is that? Warm. This bush behind it is. Shape was actually a little more yellow than the oranginess I had before. These pipes. Those in. This roof in. Structure on this roof that's a little darker will help me define the rest of the shape of the roof. And there's like a cast shadow on here. That in. Okay. Anything else I really need to get in here? Maybe just define this shape a little more. Shape that goes up this building. Turn in. Okay. Okay. Oops. These buildings are all a little cooler in the shadow than I may have blocked them in at first. Just making sure that's the thing that I noticed put in. Some variation of color in these trees now. Alright, well that pretty much does it for the comparison phase. I think all that's left is just putting in the details, so we will get it set up so you can watch me do that. Okay, refinement stage. Let's put in some of these details, but before that, just want to come in and really make sure I have the right shapes for everything here that I want. So might help to have a little straight edge here and there. So character of this strange building. It would be close to impossible to paint every single window and all that in a paint this small, and you probably don't actually want to do that. It's more effective to kind of just hint at some here and there. Use as much of the canvas texture as you can to kind of hint at it. So try to just lightly go across. Just so from far away it kind of reads like the row of windows. But I'm really just scraping ever so lightly across the surface of the canvas. Use the shadows to your advantage as much as you can. By the way, in a lot of circumstances, I would either just skip this part or wait till the painting is dry enough so I don't have to worry about being so careful with the detail. But I'm just showing you that it's possible, even a canvas this small, to try and hint at details. That's all we're really doing, is just hinting at details and just using the remaining small shadow shapes to hint at what we're actually looking at. Give just an indication of things here and there. Like there's some trees kind of peeking up. The shape of this forest, that makes kind of a detail. The whole idea is that these small shapes stacked on top of each other start to read like actual detail, even though you're not like going in there with a super small brush or anything. It's still hinting at all the small shapes we're seeing in the buildings. Maybe just paint the smallest, darkest windows you see, or the biggest, darkest windows you see. Maybe any strips of light shapes they have yet to block in. And just leave them pretty simple, even like for this refinement stage. They don't really actually need to be that refined. So in order to put such dark color on top of a wet light spot on your painting, you only have so much space to drag your paint or your brush across the canvas before it picks up too much of the color underneath, and then it stops being as dark as you want. So it's a good idea to have a little pile of your dark color and then just do one little bit. If it doesn't work, Just keep dipping into it until it's finally as dark as you want. And pretty much the same thing for the lights. So, even though it might look very easily overlooked, I'm wiping my brush thoroughly before I switch between light and dark. And ideally, I would have another brush for the light shapes, and I guess I could use that smaller one there too, but the interest of speed, sometimes I just will try to paint it all with one brush and just kind of wipe off thoroughly or swish it in my solvent to get my brush as clean as I can. But for the most part, you can just wipe off your brush thoroughly. But usually it is a good idea to at least use some solvent to clean your brush between going from your light pile to your dark piles. Just so that your brush isn't so contaminated that it makes it difficult to get the colors you want to put down. Just here and there. Some windows. This part needs a lot of work. Actually didn't really paint this very accurately. Kind of this little penthouse area of the building here. So, if you're kind of new to painting and your dexterity isn't quite enough that you feel confident to be able to do these kind of sharp, chiselly strokes, what you could do is you could always pop it off your thing and kind of switch it to vertical. And if you find that you could either do vertical strokes easier or horizontal strokes easier, you can flip your canvas to 90 degrees and put in the shapes that way. So I'm mostly just using my pinky to steady my fingers. It's too small of a canvas that I don't feel super confident about using my straight edge on this. I feel like I'll make a mess of what I got by laying the little plastic straight edge down, so I'm just doing it free-handed. Doing all right. Just hint at some of these windows here. Trying to be a little bit uniform with them, but it's totally fine. It might be more interesting visually if they're slightly different from each other. It's kind of more how it is in real life anyway. Some people have their shades drawn, some people don't, so it kind of gives a little bit of an impression of that. Alright, one thing I haven't really done much of in this video series is use a palette knife when I'm painting, and I want to use a palette knife here because I feel like I need some thickness in the paint for this part that's supposed to be my focal point. So I'll just put down a bunch and just kind of sculpt it out from there. Maybe that's a little too big, but I just wanted this area to attract a little bit more attention. I feel like adding the detail in the other parts is starting to take the focus away from up here, which is where we want the interaction of the buildings up toward the top between the sky and the buildings to be the main focus. So putting these thicker highlights up here to kind of get your attention back up this way. So using that interaction of the paint thickness to get your eye back up there is a pretty effective way of doing that. So now I feel a little better about putting detail back down here, because the variation in texture up here will really get your eye back up to this area. And adding some little shadow details up here will also help. Dark. It's better. Some dark shadow shapes up here. Just to get our focus back to where I want it. Things a little sharper up there. Highlights. This actually needs to get darker. Shadow shape. That. Just a couple of highlights here and there. Okay. Just a couple little details here and there. I feel like this could use just a little bit more definition here. So I kind of just haphazardly blocked it in this final stage. But yeah, just make sure you have a brush in a flat brush in good shape. This one's starting to wear down, but I could still get something out of it if I load it up enough. So cast shadow underneath. Feeling of it being more of a balcony. Might have been a little too saturated there. Tone it down a bit. Okay. Anything else? Just a odd little bit of highlight here and there for detail. Shadows on the roof here. I don't know if I like that. Turn it down a bit. Okay. Anything else left? At this point, we're just hunting for small shapes to further define the large shapes around them. But really, it's up to you how far you want to take the detail at this point. It's a small painting, so I'm not even able to take it much further unless I decide to let it dry, come back. But this demo here, I think it's plenty defined. Okay, well, that is how I paint buildings in a cityscape vista. And yeah, we're at about an hour anyway, so yeah. Hope you guys found that to be a useful demonstration in order to know how to simplify buildings and keep them looking both fresh and defined, even at this small level. Okay?